physiotherapy, and I help women get back on the trail. I have a pop-up on my computer screen. And today I'm hopping on here to talk about struggling with hip pain, lack of confidence, like in your hips, in your climbing ability, when you're on hills, when you're going for longer distances. This is an area through the pelvis. When I'm talking about the hip, it can be a lot of different areas where we start having trouble. Here in the groin, over on the side is a really common place where people start to feel weak or sore. In the back, more through the glute, kind of getting into where this dimple is, coming up the back. All of this area is kind of what I'm focusing on today and for one more video next week. So, especially in women, this is an area that becomes kind of dysfunctional, and you might either feel pain, discomfort, stiffness, soreness, weakness, and or sometimes it presents as just not feeling very strong or confident when you're out on the trail, when you're on uneven terrain. If you have to kind of lift your foot up high, I hear this a lot of times from patients. It's really hard to lift. I can step up with this leg fine, but when I go to step up with this one, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I feel like I'm scrambling. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why that can happen. And sometimes what we think about a lot with physical therapy is strengthening or exercises to make muscles stronger. If we have a problem, it's probably our fault. We need to make something stronger. And sometimes it is that simple. We just need a little more strength. But sometimes it's a little more complicated, a little more nuanced, and it's more about, can we access the strength that we need when we need it? So we can have a strong muscle. It has lots of fibers, it's big, it's hypertrophied, but if it's not in a position to work for us biomechanically when we need it, then we still may have trouble with the task, like climbing up the steps, climbing up a hill, that kind of thing. So the biggest piece that plays a role into can you access the strength that you have, in my opinion, is your alignment or posture. So what am I talking about when I say posture? It's not the kind of posture like, oh, I know my posture's so bad, I should sit up tall. It's not necessarily something that we are consciously aware of or consciously creating. It's how our body, just the tensegrity model of all of our fascia and our muscle and our bones, how is it in space? When we're not paying attention, when we're not trying, what's the position of our body? And especially when we're moving, when we're running, when we're walking, when we're climbing hills, what's the little degrees of difference in how a joint starts to try to do a push or a pull can make a big difference in how good it feels or how effective it feels. So in the last video, I talked a little bit about hip alignment, low back and pelvic alignment, and we talked a bit about how if you're kind of pulled forward here, you're going to be losing some forces through these joints, and you're not going to be as effective. And we talked about some ways to mobilize different areas of our body to improve that alignment. I am wearing a denim jumpsuit. It just hit me, and it felt like a denim jumpsuit kind of day because fall's coming. Okay, that's as an aside. So we're continuing. I'm kind of continuing with that theme of, all right, so let's say you don't have optimal alignment for your pelvis and your hips for them to work great. You can do some things to mobilize them to improve that alignment. Then the next step is, can you use that new mobility in a really functional way? And one of the things that the hip really needs to be able to do is two different movements at the same time. Extend or go behind us, and also abduct or go out to the side. So when we're standing and when we're trying to climb on a hill, we need this hip to do that. Extend and abduct and externally rotate. if it can't do that or doesn't know how to do that, then you're going to push, and all this force and energy, it just gets lost out of the system. And that's what starts creating, you don't feel confident, it doesn't feel good, and you start getting pain and stress on the tissues and compensation here, and then your back is tight and all of this nonsense. So a lot of times we lose the ability, we don't get to practice that a lot, and so we're not very good at it. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to help your hip, help your butt, help your hip muscles be able to push behind you and out to the side so that you're strong when you go up a step or climb the hill or push off on your stance phase of running without doing a lot of extension through your back or using your back muscles to try to help you do it. Another piece of this is having good lumbar or low back alignment. That's part of what helps the whole core work and also your hip. But that's for another talk. So, all right, I want to make sure you can see these 2 movements. I give these out all the time, usually right after we've done a lot of mobility work through the hips or the low back or the pelvis. If someone's got some asymmetries or alignment that's affecting, their ability or their problem or their primary complaint, then we're helping to balance that, and then we're adding in these 2 exercises really frequently. Okay, so here we go. You're on your back, legs are bent. These, by the way, are suggestions. This is for educational purposes. I don't know your problem. I don't know what would help you the most. For most people, they're able to do these, but for some people, they're not appropriate. And if you do them poorly and you have another kind of problem, then that might be a problem for you or not feel very good, especially in your low back. So just know that these are suggestions and some things that I see clinically and that work for a lot of my patients. So you're on your back. Everyone's maybe seen a bridge or for a butt exercise to lift, okay? This isn't going to show very well because I've got blue on blue here. So I want you to be able to see what's going on with my low back and pelvis here. So we talked about the hip needs to be able to extend or get straight and go behind the body to push off. And it needs to be able to do that without being in this arched position. Just doing that feels really compressive on my back. It doesn't feel very good. So one of the ways I help people feel and get better at doing that is to kind of overcompensate and go the other way. And we start by doing what's kind of commonly referred to as a posterior pelvic tilt, or flattening your low back against the floor. You feel a little nice stretch through there. This isn't a great idea if you're dealing with an active disc bulge potentially. But so you're tucking, and then you're going to keep that tuck. So I'm really keeping this posteriorly rotated here and pushing through my feet. And I'm really working, I'm squeezing my bottom a lot to overcome the tightness in the front of my hip. Here, I'm going as high as I can without this happening. See what can happen if I lose my glute engagement? Then I've lifted my legs, but this looks like I'm just sort of hanging there. All right, that's not it. Tuck, press up, press up. I'm keeping that more flattened back position, and my glutes are working super hard here to keep me all the way up in this position. Then on the way down, I'm going to keep it tucked and unroll back down. Roll up, squeeze tight with the glutes, unroll back down. I want you to see the difference if I were to just sort of arch my back and lift up. I can do that. I'm using my back muscles. My glutes are working a little bit, but really not very much at all. And my back feels really tight and compressed. So this is, I like to call this a segmental bridge or a roll-up bridge. Sometimes they do something similar to this in Pilates. Okay, that's one, and that's the one that's a little more straightforward. Here's the other one, which is trickier, and it usually takes people a little bit more time to do it, to get it down. I'm going to show you from a couple of different angles, and hopefully hopefully you'll be able to get it. This is from, I learned this from the Institute of Physical Art. I like to say where I learn things. They're a great physical therapy educational organization, and they taught me a lot about what I know today. Okay, so they named this, Greg Johnson named this Reach for the Stars. And what you're doing here is one side of your body is just relaxed. It's not getting in on the action here at all. The other side, what I'm thinking is I'm pushing my foot down into the floor. My knee is tracking out over my toes, and I'm pressing this hip up towards the ceiling. And as I do that, I end up kind of rolling onto the other side, and then I'm going to come back down. So I want you to maybe see it from a different direction. Okay, my knee is not, here's another. My knee stays over the toe, like that. And this side is just relaxed. It's not getting lifted up. Hip is opening. And as I really try to stretch and reach up for the stars, my glute muscles are squeezing a lot. And what am I doing? I'm doing extension, external rotation, abduction. Now my knee is bent, which also gives you kind of a nice stretch through the front of the hip. That's not necessarily the position that you're in when you're up and walking around, but it's a really good way to force your hip and your glutes to figure out how to do something that quite often they've kind of forgotten how to do. All right, so that's the two moves. Let me know if this was helpful or if it was confusing. Certainly that last movement is kind of tricky to get, so I don't want to leave you with something that was just confusing, but hey Jen. So let me know if it was helpful. Just tell me in the comments, or if it was confusing or not that helpful, any of those things. It won't hurt my feelings too much. And thanks for showing up. I'll be doing this one more time, talking about hips next week, and then we'll keep a similar theme to alignment and posture, because that just seems appropriate for back to school, but we'll change it up a little bit. All right, thanks so much.